Yo, this is Alup. You got pretty big balls to watch Thorin's YouTube videos.
The FACEIT Major London was the worst major that I've seen of the 13 held thus far. Even though some of the earlier ones were just a few days long, comparatively, had obviously much worse formats in certain scenarios. My experience watching this major, I think the experience from what I'm getting from the community of people watching the major didn't live up to what a major's supposed to be, and especially with our level of expectation for 2018, for many years into CSGO being a thing. This is actually our 5th year of having majors, or at least we're coinciding with the 5th anniversary of a major. There's some factors here that were in FACEIT's control. We'll talk about those first. And there were some factors that weren't in FACEIT's control. You can't blame them for. So first of all, the factors that are in FACEIT's control, well, before the major even began, because technically the major cycle is part of it, but I'm not including that with the major, there were some issues with some of the things that FACEIT did and how they handled them that certainly put people a little bit on edge or made them a bit skeptical or a bit concerned of like, if they're going to deal with some minor things this way, and in this particular tone, how are they going to respond to a real issue or a bigger problem or something that's actually quite important and might affect the experience? And quite frankly, I don't think they set the tone very well, because before the major, they had the issue with the Americas minor, where they actually picked an entirely inappropriate qualification method for one of the teams that made it to the minor. Then you had the eligibility issue, where it turns out a bunch of teams could have done roster moves, could have poached talent that actually weren't later able to, because you didn't tell everyone publicly. You just omitted it and expected people to guess that it wasn't there, and therefore it didn't count, and then lied about that and implied that you'd told everyone outright when people can prove that they did not tell everyone. Then there's the whole rulebook stuff, where that was the most minor issue of all. You just made a mistake in the rulebook with saying who would play who in the playoffs, but rather than just come out and correct it and all the rest of it, still we saw like an inability for the higher ups at FACEIT to acknowledge it, some sort of weird behavior of like trying to ignore the problem and just bury your head, because then we came to the actual problems of the major. So week 1 of the major, what used to be the major qualifier, was a fucking joke. There was tech issues up the arse to an extent I've actually never seen at a major before, at least in CSGO. First of all, you had the FPS issues. People, even as week 2 was starting, were saying about how they're having problems with the PCs and how did they get them to get max FPS and get them to get an FPS that was at a level that was appropriate for a big tournament, the World Championship, something that's going to define people's legacies. Then you had the whole thing where there was this bug where some players in a server, all of their footsteps wouldn't go through. So if you were hiding behind a box or behind a wall and you heard some footsteps, perhaps the guy was actually already there and you thought he was further away based on the footsteps. Perhaps you heard no footsteps at all and the opponent might think he did and think that you're going to have a fair fight with them, but you're surprised. Or maybe somehow he knows that he doesn't have footsteps or he's not hearing your footsteps. A whole scenario. This was a huge issue, and this is a nightmare scenario because that will potentially affect the outcome of matches. There are going to be matches that are going to be 16-14s and are going to be 16-13s. That 1 or 2 rounds changes who wins that game. And if you have an issue like this, I think it's pretty legit actually for players to complain. That is not the environment in which you should be playing the game, because it's not even just that there is something busted. Like, this wasn't even busted fairly for each team. It's not like everyone got exactly the same amount or happened at the same exact times. This was almost an arbitrary element to it, a part that nobody could know about. And so it was actually one of the bigger issues I've heard of in a tournament. So when someone like MSL and North complains, it's actually legitimate. I mean, they're, especially a team like theirs, by the way, a very tactical team, a team trying to play off team play and make reads on the opponent. If you're a team like VeXii, maybe it's not as big a deal for you. In fact, maybe it could benefit you if you're rushing through smokes and playing very aggressively, taking lots of aim duels, just swarming people with your guns, right? You might not need it as much. So there are certain teams that might benefit from this, and there are certain teams that it's fairly obvious would potentially take a hit in terms of their particular strengths. So yes, it is a problem that we have something like this going on. And all of this combined, along with internet outages, which I can't really know how much of that's to do with FACEIT's control, but I have to consider it because they are the ones who chose the venue, chose the internet connection, and then how to deal with it. I can't really know that. I'd have to hear someone qualified from Twitch or something like that to tell me whether or not that was their fault. But I do know that this all conspired to bring delays that were unacceptable. Like, day 1 was a fucking joke. Astralis versus Complexity, I think, was the game I'm remembering, which didn't even happen on day 1, and because of rescheduling, they either would have had to play really late at night, which is not ideal, or what they did, which is rescheduled to the next day, because you've got to fit an extra game in, they have to come early. So you go from, I'm supposed to play my game late at night, I'm playing it early in the morning. Entirely the opposite schedule. You've built your whole day around it being at the end of the day. That's not acceptable either. Like, that result in the end could have cost someone a playoff spot, could have been really costly for what it meant for the tournament and how their major went, and you're just playing God with the time schedule. Yes, not capriciously, you had no choice in the particular scenario, but you're making it so they have to play early the next morning, and obviously that ruins the viewing experience. Now again, I can't know how much of that's to do with FACEIT, but all I can say is the delays happened, and that's the way they help with it. Then you got to look at the whole talent setup. Now, I'll do a separate video, as I promised before, because now that the major's done, no one's job is in any trouble, so I can, well, at least not from outside of FACEIT, so I can go ahead and actually reveal some of that information, but I'll do that in a separate video, because it deserves its own video, because it's a different theme. It's about how FACEIT have regressed the industry a number of years with how they've dealt with certain political and economic alignments within the industry. Many, many more that have nothing to do with me, by the way, before any idiot just suggests that's what it's about. First of all, I'll just say this. I think their talent setup was mismatched. I think they had too many of certain types of people, not enough of others. I think there are people over the year who you look at who did a fantastic job who just didn't even get acknowledged. And I think particularly once you went into the playoffs, they avoided some pitfalls in the end, but actually some of them would have been even worse left to their own devices. Then you've got to consider, I think they were missing some people to go in line with that, to bolster up the talent. And then finally, this is partially a talent issue. With the talent and then the overall theme and vibe of the major, I thought it was way too jokey. I thought it was way too light-hearted. Like, do that for your own events. If you think ECS is fun, do that. If you think that's your vibe, if that's the brand of Dan and Bardolph, great, have them do that. But for a major, this is a world championship, mate. This is one of 13 enormous tournaments in the history of CSGO thus far. This is supposed to be epic. This is supposed to be life-changing shit. Think about how the international is portrayed. This has to be epic, mate. Don't make it all jokey. Don't make it jokey in the final. Don't play a fun parlor clip during the grand final while I'm trying to watch the fucking match and be super into it. And the fact that this is going to decide whether Simple's the greatest player ever or whether Astralis is cement. I don't want to see some fucking shit like that. That just ruins my whole vibe. That brings me right down. That's the reason why when I've written the intros for people and helped them with those, I'm always putting it in that kind of vernacular, trying to set it up that it's amazing shit, like really hit you with certain words that paint crazy imagery and get you all hyped up for it. By the way, those fucking sucked. Anyone who thinks that's easy, listen, there's other people in the industry could write them. I might even be able to recommend some of them, but whoever's doing it right now, this ain't it, mate. Like, you guys can't do it. You're doing what you're doing. It's all fluffed. It's all fucking cliched. It just sucks, quite frankly. It's like a really bad movie trailer script. Now, there are many factors that weren't in FACEIT's control, and quite frankly, were the ultimate factors that decided that the major sucked. So actually, most of why the major sucked wasn't FACEIT's fault. Because first of all, I think whoever determined when this major was held fucked up massively, but in a way we've never tried before. And so I don't 100% blame them, but I could have guessed some of this personally. And now that it's happened, yeah, I'm not a fan. So first of all, it was held after the player break. So people, it's not just that they had a break from being at tournaments, people literally were on holiday. You can go on their Instagrams and see them in fucking Mauritius and the Maldives, and they're on fucking beaches, sipping out of highball glasses or whatever, and having fucking orange juice and watching a girl with her ass out in a bikini. They weren't thinking about Counter-Strike. They weren't playing Counter-Strike. They weren't preparing for a major. And so as a result, you've let everyone's form get broken, ruined, taken to a lower level. And then they come back after their holiday. Some of them had tournaments like MIBR went to Zotac, a small tournament. It actually had a lot of money, but in terms of prestige, then a number of teams had DreamHack Stockholm. Okay, one tournament to warm you up and then go straight into another tournament. What we saw was this wasn't enough. This player break should have been held after the major. The major should have put the capper on the season of Counter-Strike and all the big tournaments, and therefore Na'Vi and Astralis and all these teams should have come in peak form to the major, played the major, then everyone goes on holiday. Then people can make roster moves and people can let their form break and they can start over in the season. And you know what? Go ahead and throw in. Why not put the new map after the player break? Why have it so that we have a scenario like we had where it just comes halfway through the season, seemingly at times? Then you've got to look at the fact that even though there are past tournaments which arguably had worse formats than Swiss System unseeded, or at least poorly seeded based on the major system, and best of ones combined is just getting old. That's just an ambience element. That's about how we feel about the tournament and what it does to our excitement levels. Before, it was new, it was novel, we didn't quite know where it was going to go, we hoped for the good things, we looked at the good things, we saw the differences from the old system and we tried to celebrate them if we could. Now, we're so used to it that all we can see is the flaws. The flaws are just too glaring. And we look at people who have paths through the tournament that would be impossible with a properly seeded GSL system or with best of threes in a Swiss system. So think of these two teams' paths. Na'Vi, their first 3 games were against Astralis, number 1 ranked team in the world, FaZe Clan, I think number 4 ranked team in the world, and NIP, okay, a team that's not top ranked, but has been on the rise. That's their first 3 games in this Swiss system. Then you go and look at NIP's path. NIP's first game was against Mouse Sports. I think, what was that, like the number 5 or number 6 ranked team in the world? You're playing them immediately as NIP. Like, you're not close to the worst tournament in the team in the tournament, or worst ranked in the tournament. Then after that, they went Mouse Sports in the Team Liquid, number 3 ranked team in the world, and then Na'Vi, number 2 ranked team in the world. Now, how you're getting 3 opponents who are top 5 ranked in the world, and you didn't win or lose all these games, by the way, and it's not like they lost all those games. These are 2 examples of how utterly flawed this particular poorly seeded into unseeded for the later rounds until you get to round 3 to 5, how poorly seeded those are. And quite frankly, that Bucot system, okay, I actually think it's a minor improvement, but it's based on circular logic of how you did in this tournament and what your record is in this tournament. And so no, actually, I think it's quite flawed when you looked at who got drawn for the playoffs, and I don't think it fixes the issue. I think you've first of all got to have best of threes to eliminate some of the variance and make it less of a big deal that you get bad matchups. But in terms of like top ranked teams, that has to be fixed with seeding, because in a GSL system where you split them up, at least it would then be impossible to get number 1, number 2, number 3 ranked teams in the world and all play them all in a row. That could not happen. So now we see that and we know it's coming. You have this expectation of like, I'll probably should be ruined with this matchup. Oh, what's that? Yeah, it was. Oh, great. So yeah, that's a problem. That should not be happening. Then you've got to figure that these aspects combined with the tech issues then led to tons of upsets. Best of 1, unseeded Swiss, badly seeded Swiss, and tech issues all combined and rescheduling. Yeah, you know what? We had a gang of upsets, and not in a fashion where it's like, wow, the underdog outplayed them. It's sort of like the underdog did all right. What the fuck happened to the top team? A lot of top teams looking in bad form, perhaps because of the player break, perhaps because everything's been reset, perhaps because of the tech issues, perhaps because of the format, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. End result, shit games. Then you've got to consider that FACEIT got very unlucky with the games. They had a couple of good games in week 1 and week 2 in the Swiss systems, particularly the Astralis losses in overtime. But I have to say, I can't even say this is just matchups, but the playoffs were fucking terrible. I mean, obviously almost every series was 2-0. Most series were not competitive. It's not even just the matchups, because on paper, MIBR Na'Vi could be good. On paper, all of the Astralis matchups should have been really entertaining. It's just that so few lived up to their billing. Now, that isn't FACEIT's fault. And in fact, the playoff format is the same as every playoff format for every major, except we don't have a randomizer for the 3rd map now. But aside from that, you know, it's just a bad luck of the draw, I'm afraid. You had a real lack of good games, you had a real lack of exciting games, and as a result, you never got really hyped about the major. You never got like a crazy feeling of like, I can't wait to see what happens in the next match, or I can't believe this is happening. The pressure, the excitement, the memorable things, none of that was going on. You never got kicked into that major gear once you got to the playoffs. You never got the chills of like, it's the major. This was just like, it felt like just another tournament. In fact, it felt like the tournament never properly started and began, because I never got into that mood I've got into in every other major, including ones I was just sat at home watching, like the ones from kind of VeXii and Cologne at times. Then you've got to add in, again, nothing to do with FACEIT, and this is actually nothing to do with the game or the format, which is Astralis was just too good. Like, we've never seen a team before that was just too good and just rolled the whole tournament. The closest you can come is Virtus Pro at EMS1 kind of VeXii 2014. And that was in such a brutal fashion, such an unexpected fashion. It was still thrilling. It was still exciting. Astralis winning here, I mean, the number 4, number 3, and number 2 ranked teams in the world couldn't win a map against them in the playoffs. That's not the tournament's problem. Astralis are too fucking good, and they just cleaned them up. Then you have a look, their map pool's too good, so that you can't create many exciting 3-map series against them, and people don't win a map against them. People sometimes don't even get double digits against them, because they even win their opponent's map pick as well as their own map pick, especially if it's Nuke. Then you've got to finally add the viewership, for whatever reason, never got anywhere close to epic levels. I mean, if anything, the viewership response, the feedback of that aspect shows that this was a fucking shit major and that no one really cared and no one ever got fully excited. It wasn't like at the International League of Legends World Championship. Didn't have that vibe about it, and the viewership responded accordingly. It did not seem that sick. Didn't even seem like it came close to breaking the record. And I'm not exaggerating, by the way, when I say that it's the worst major we've had. Like, sure, in context, some of them at their time might objectively have overall been worse, like better format now, more teams, better qualification system. Yeah, there's factors I could give you that are better, but in the context of their particular time, this is the worst, and this is the worst vibe we've ever had. Because think of some of the classics people might bring up that sucked in the past. So my particular pick is always going to be ESL 1 Cologne 2014. It had new maps that we'd never played before. It had a randomizer that could ruin series, as it did. We had a whole bunch of fluke wins and stupid matches that were exciting, but some of them weren't that quality in terms of actual Counter-Strike. But you know what? We still had some amazing storylines. We still had incredible upsets that were exciting to watch. We still had that epic NIP run where you had them beat Cloud9 and then LDLC and then Fnatic, all in 3-game series, all in close series, all unexpected, all as an underdog. Then you had like the Na'Vi versus Fnatic series, which was kind of insane and went to a map that neither team played and each had gambled, and then the randomizer picked it out as the third map. There was a plenty of good storylines, some very good playoff matches, and as a result, it's still remembered fondly for its storyline and what happened, and you certainly can't say it was boring the whole time. A lot of people are going to cite PGL Krakow last year. Okay, it had a lot of tech and PC issues. There was also a lot of weird upsets in that one. I think people started to hit on Swiss system there. But you know what? Astralis versus SK in the round of 8 was a fucking incredible display. And what a crazy upset. And what an actually, like, high-quality match. I know it was a 2-0, but that was some champagne Counter-Strike. Then, look at the semi-final, Astralis versus Gambit. Again, amazing series. What an epic way for Gambit to beat Astralis, and in doing so, all but win the major and unexpectedly win the major. Let's talk about DreamHack Cluj and Poker, another maligned major. So it had attendance issues, didn't pack out the whole stadium and make an insane atmosphere. But you know what? You look at the playoffs there, you had some amazing runs. You had, obviously, the Luminosity guys even making the playoffs. You had Envious versus G2 in that amazing series where G2 almost made it to the final with a brand new player. You had Envious overcome Fnatic and end their era. You had Na'Vi's rise going all the way to the final of the major for the first time with Guardians hard carrying. You had some amazing shit happening in that playoffs. Finally, how about the first ever major? DreamHack Winner 2013 was the first, so it was the smallest, the shortest, most basic setup, didn't have a crazy crowd, it was just in the middle of nowhere in Sweden. Then you've got Complexity's run. Team that might not even have made the playoffs made it all the way to top 4. Then you had Fnatic upsetting everyone in their sights, in the end beating the greatest lineup of all time to win the first fucking major in unexpected fashion. You had the NiP versus Very Games, highly anticipated clash that did go to 3 maps. Sure, it didn't quite live up to the billing, but it was still incredibly exciting, very tense, could have changed the whole fate of maybe the major and even maybe more. Bear in mind, there was an era on the line potentially. So, yeah, I have to say overall, despite some of their problems, they all had the memorable aspects. They all had the parts, which if you notice, it's mainly about the games. Because if you can get the good games, that's what sticks with people over the minor issues. We're going to forget about a small PC issue, a small tech issue, a delay on day one. But we're going to remember the epic games. And unfortunately for the FACEIT guys, that didn't happen at this particular major. Now, the next major is IM Katowice early next year. This is actually, I think, going to be a high-quality event. All the Katowice majors have been pretty good thus far. ESL does a very good job in terms of a lot of these issues. They've improved their PC situation, a lot less tech issues. They do a good job in terms of the setup. Obviously, they have experience doing majors. They're now a lot better with the PR. They hire a better talent group. Not always the best talent. There's a few people I'd like to see on there. But in this particular scenario, and by the way, maybe I'll do a video about that myself for the next one. My dream, obviously, would be something like MLG holds a major. Now, that's probably not going to happen. So if that can't happen, if I want to suggest a new potential organisation to have a major, I'm going to go ahead and say this. What about StarLadder? I'd like to see a major in the CIS region. First of all, the crowds can support it. Those regions have heavily been invested in CSGO and Dota and Valve games. StarLadder is a company that supported Valve from the very beginning. I'd like to see StarLadder get one in the future, maybe the second major of next year. And this major sucked, let's be real. This video was kindly supported by Gardner Wilson, Dean Tanglis, Alex Adams, Eddie Wingfors, Andreas Snazore Westerlund, godawfulwasteofspace, Kyla Harris, Travis Greb, James Harding, Daniel Yordanov, VeXii, Robert Baxter, and a special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest to appear in my content? Do you want to ask me a question in my monthly AMA? Do you want teasers for upcoming content and guests? Want to take part in a discussion about esports with me? Put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today. Link in the description box.